There comes a moment when your silence speaks louder than your words, when your absence echoes louder than your presence ever did. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to disappear, you see. People rarely value consistency, they ignore kindness, take availability for granted and assume your loyalty is forever. But the moment you vanish, no calls, no texts, no presence, that's when the truth sets in. Your energy was never ordinary, it was powerful, healing, irreplaceable. When you walk away without warning, you shift the entire dynamic. It's not about ghosting someone in immaturity. It's about reclaiming your peace in silence. Disappearing isn't loud, but it's disruptive. It makes people pause and reevaluate everything they thought they knew about your tolerance. It's a move of strength, not weakness. Sometimes people only understand boundaries when they're enforced without words. You can talk, explain, and try to fix things, but it often falls on deaf ears. But when you simply remove yourself, when your energy suddenly disappears from their world, it forces them to notice what they ignored. Silence can't be argued with. It doesn't defend itself, and that's why it holds power. It's a move that says, I don't need to prove my worth. My absence will do it for me. The world is used to loud responses, heated arguments, and emotional explosions. So when you exit quietly, it shocks the system. It's the opposite of what they expect, and that very unpredictability commands attention. Power isn't always in what you say. Sometimes it's in what you choose not to say. Disappearing challenges their ego. Most people think you'll always come back. They rely on your forgiveness, your patience, your kindness. When you vanish without permission or explanation, it interrupts their control. It shows that you're not bound by their timeline or comfort. It reminds them that you were a choice, not an obligation, and that choice has now been revoked. When you disappear, you reset the narrative. You're no longer the one waiting for an apology, begging to be understood, or justifying your value. You walk out of that role entirely, and in doing so, you flip the emotional script. The one who once felt powerful now feels powerless in your absence. It's not about being manipulative, it's about choosing dignity. You've said enough, you've given enough, you've tried enough. Walking away doesn't mean you're heartless. It means you finally understand that your presence should be a privilege, not a guarantee. People must earn access to your peace, not drain it. Disappearing isn't cowardice, it's control. It's knowing when a space no longer serves you, and having the emotional intelligence to remove yourself without drama. It shows maturity, clarity, and restraint. Not everyone deserves closure. Some people need to sit with the silence and figure it out on their own. The most powerful thing about disappearing is this: they never see it coming. And once you're gone, they realize just how loud your quiet really is. There's something dangerously invisible about consistency. When you show up every time, reply right away, support them without question, and stay emotionally available, people start assuming it's just who you are, not something you choose to give. They confuse your loyalty with obligation. They stop seeing your presence as a gift and start treating it like background noise. They get used to the check-ins, the good morning texts, the way you remember the little things. They don't realize how much effort it takes to constantly show up until that presence is no longer there. They assume you'll always be around because you always have been, so they stop trying, they stop appreciating, but one day the routine breaks, the messages don't come, the calls go unanswered, you're no longer the emotional safety net, and suddenly what was once taken for granted becomes painfully obvious. Your absence feels heavier than your presence ever did, because they underestimated how much you were holding them together. Consistency isn't just about being there. It's about being reliable, emotionally available, and dependable, even when you're not okay yourself, and that kind of consistency is rare. When you disappear, people are forced to confront the reality that what they had wasn't ordinary. It was something stable in a world that constantly shifts. It had value they never properly acknowledged. People don't notice what they're being given when they think it'll always be there. They start to think your kindness is owed. Your love is endless. Your energy is theirs to drain. It's only when the well dries up that they realize it was full because you kept filling it. Quietly, consistently, with no recognition. They remember your reliability when the replacements aren't consistent. When others flake, when no one checks on them, when the support they overlooked is no longer an option. That's when the weight of your absence hits hardest, because it forces them to feel everything they never said thank you for. The hardest truth is that some people will only learn your value through loss. They won't see your worth until they feel the void you leave behind, and that void isn't just space, it's the absence of love, effort, and energy they once received effortlessly. You taught them comfort. Now they sit in the discomfort of not having it. You were a steady presence in an inconsistent world. And the day you disappear is the day they realize that not everyone will show up the way you did. And not everyone will stay the way you tried to. When you stop talking, the noise in their head gets louder. Your silence unsettles them because it leaves space for reflection, guilt, questions, and accountability. Without your voice to distract or comfort them, they're left alone with the reality of their own behavior. And for some, that's the first time they've truly had to look in the mirror. Your silence isn't just an absence of sound. It's a powerful form of communication. It says, think about how you made me feel. It invites self-examination. Not everyone accepts that invitation, but those who do often realize that they weren't as innocent or as thoughtful as they once believed. Your quiet presence becomes their inner echo, replaying the things they missed, ignored, or dismissed. When you were speaking, when you were expressing pain, frustration, or disappointment, they might have brushed it off, dismissed you as dramatic or needy, but silence can't be debated. It can't be ignored. It forces them to sit with what's been left unsaid, to decode the meaning behind your withdrawal, and that is where reflection begins. There's no deflection when you go quiet, no one to argue with, no emotional outburst to use as a scapegoat. Just silence, and that silence becomes uncomfortable because it holds up a mirror to the way they showed up for you, or didn't, a mirror to the energy they gave, the words they used, the times they didn't choose you when they should have. Silence creates distance, and in that distance, people begin to observe their past actions more clearly. They start to wonder, did I listen enough? Did I show up right? Was I too careless? Too cold? The questions pile up because they can't ask you for answers anymore. The silence has taken that privilege away. They may even scroll through old conversations, trying to find where things shifted, searching for clues in messages they once ignored or undervalued. Suddenly, your words matter again. But this time, you're not repeating them. They're replaying them in their own mind, wishing they had listened more carefully when they had the chance. What once seemed small to them, the sighs in your voice, the delayed responses, the quiet withdrawals, now takes on new meaning. They realize those were signs, warnings, gentle indicators that something inside you was breaking, but they didn't hear you then. Now, your silence screams what your words could never make them understand. That's the power of silence. It doesn't just create distance, it creates a mirror. And when they finally look into it, they might not like what they see staring back. The first thing they feel when you disappear is confusion. Not heartbreak, not guilt, just confusion. They're disoriented, lost in the shift of energy they didn't see coming. They start asking themselves questions, but none of the answers make sense, because in their mind you were supposed to stay. They didn't expect you to leave, not you. Not the person who always forgave, always reached out first, always kept the connection alive. You were the consistent one, the reliable one, the emotional anchor. They thought you'd tolerate anything before walking away. That was their first mistake, mistaking your patience for permanence. At first, they assume it's temporary. Maybe you're just taking space. Maybe you'll cool down. They give it a few hours, then a day, then several. But the silence lingers, no calls, no texts, no presence. That's when confusion starts turning into panic. Why aren't you coming back this time? They scroll through old messages looking for clues. They replay the last conversation in their head, wondering if they missed something. They start to doubt their own judgment, thinking, did I do something wrong? Were there signs? And the truth is, there were signs, but they ignored them because they thought your love was unconditional. They underestimated your strength. They saw your softness, your empathy, your loyalty, but not the line that runs deep beneath it all. They never imagined that one day you would get tired, tired of being overlooked, tired of being the only one trying, tired of carrying the emotional weight of a one-sided connection. Their confusion is rooted in ego. They assumed they had a hold on you, that no matter what happened, you'd be the one to fix it. So when you simply disappear, no warnings, no closure, they feel powerless. That power shift hits their pride before it ever hits their heart. They begin to analyze everything. Was she serious when she said she felt unappreciated? Was he hurt when I said that? Maybe I should have listened more. They thought your words were just emotional reactions. Now they realize those words were truth. And they're confused because they never truly listened when it mattered. They reach for distractions. They try to replace your energy with something else. Another person, another friend, another conversation. But nothing lands the same, nothing feels quite right, and the confusion grows. Why does it feel so empty now? It's because they were never ready to lose you, and they didn't think they ever would. They may even convince themselves that you'll come back eventually, that you just need time, that you're testing them. But deep down, the confusion begins to give way to something heavier. The quiet realization that this time, maybe, you're really gone. Confusion is the first stage of the wake-up call. Because when someone believes you'll always stay your eggs, it is the last thing they expect, and the first thing that forces them to face what they've done. Absence is the great revealer. When you're no longer around, everything you did, every little thing, suddenly stands out. The calls they used to ignore now feel like lifelines they miss. The presence they took for granted becomes the silence they can't escape. In your absence, your value becomes crystal clear. Clarity doesn't always come when someone's in your life. It comes when you're no longer available to them. While you were present, your efforts blended into the background of their routine. You were there so they didn't have to think too deeply about what it meant to have someone like you consistently showing up. But now that you're gone, there's a vacuum, and that vacuum speaks volumes. They start to realize how your words carried comfort, how your presence softened their hard days, how your laughter, your reminders, your thoughtfulness kept things from falling apart. Things they once labeled as small now feel massive in their absence. They didn't understand the weight you carried until they feel its sudden release. Absence has a way of slowing everything down. It gives people time to sit with their thoughts, to notice the subtle voids where you once filled in the gaps. The messages are no longer coming in, the support system is down, the emotional safe zone has vanished, and that quiet makes everything clearer than noise ever could. It hits hardest in everyday moments. When they want to share something but realize you're not there to listen. When they feel low and instinctively reach for their phone, but remember you're no longer an option. That gap, that silence, that's where the clarity lives. It's the growing awareness of how deeply your presence mattered. They begin to recognize how much you protected their peace, how often you encouraged them, how deeply you cared. It wasn't loud, it wasn't boastful, but it was consistent, and now in your absence it's all they can think about. They realize that what you gave was not average. It was rare, steady, and real. They might even feel foolish, regretful, embarrassed that they didn't see it sooner, because now that you're not there, it's impossible not to notice everything you contributed. They took your presence as a given, not understanding it was a daily choice you made. One they no longer have access to, and that's the hardest part of all. Clarity often arrives too late, when the damage has already been done, when the door is already closed. Your absence doesn't just create longing, it creates understanding. An understanding they never had while you were still within reach. Emotional shifts don't hit all at once. They creep in layer by layer. At first it's disbelief. They think maybe you're just busy or going through something. They rationalize your silence, hoping it's temporary. But as time stretches, reality starts to settle in. The longer you're gone, the more their emotions begin to shift in unpredictable ways. Confusion turns into frustration. They feel a loss of control. Not because they miss you right away, but because they don't understand why you would be the one to walk away. Their ego kicks in. They start blaming you silently. Why would they leave like this? After everything I did. But deep down, those questions hide the growing fear that they pushed you too far. Then comes guilt. That's when they start looking inward, if only for a moment. Memories play like highlight reels in their head, moments where they ignored your needs, dismissed your feelings, or made you feel small. It hits them that maybe you weren't overreacting. Maybe you were holding on longer than you should have. Guilt makes way for nostalgia. Suddenly, they're replaying the good times, the times you made them laugh, made them feel safe, made them feel seen. Nostalgia doesn't ask if it's too late. It just reminds them of everything that felt right when you were around, and in that reflection, sadness starts to grow. Sadness often comes with regret. They begin to wish they had done things differently, that they had been softer with you, more grateful, less entitled. They think about the messages they never sent, the apologies they never offered, the moments they let pride win when love should have spoken instead. Somewhere in that emotional roller coaster, anxiety creeps in. What if you're really done? What if you never come back? What if someone else gets the version of you they took for granted? Their mind spirals with imagined scenarios. Suddenly, losing you isn't just possible, it's probable, and that fear becomes overwhelming. Anger sometimes rises next, not at you, but at themselves, for not appreciating you sooner, for assuming you'd always be around, for thinking they had all the time in the world. This anger doesn't come from hatred. It comes from loss, and it's directed at the version of themselves that let something so valuable slip away. And finally, there's acceptance, but it's not peaceful. It's heavy. It's the moment they realize you might not return, and that even if you did, something inside you has changed. These emotional shifts don't follow a script, but they all leave the same mark. The realization that your absence stirred something inside them they can't ignore anymore. When you choose to walk away, most people assume you're being cold, petty, or trying to teach them a lesson. But that's not the truth. Disappearing isn't about proving a point, it's about preserving your peace. It's about recognizing that your energy has been leaking into places where it was never respected, and choosing to finally patch those holes. It's not revenge when you stop explaining yourself. It's clarity. It's the moment you realize that your words won't be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. Sometimes silence is the only language that honors your healing. You're not disappearing to hurt them. You're disappearing to finally tend to the parts of yourself they neglected. You don't vanish to create emptiness in their life. You disappear to create space in your own. Space for clarity, for quiet, for emotional restoration. You've been giving, pouring, supporting, often without reciprocation. Eventually, your spirit starts whispering, "It's time to come home to yourself." Healing doesn't always look like journaling, meditating, or affirmations. Sometimes, healing is messy and quiet. It's deleting numbers without warning. It's declining calls without guilt. It's walking away without closure, not because you're cruel, but because your soul is finally choosing itself. When people see you go silent, they may call it ghosting. But real ones know, disappearing isn't ghosting when it's survival. You don't owe endless access to people who drain you. Walking away isn't a punishment, it's a return to your emotional boundaries, to your truth, to the person you were before you were buried under other people's needs. Energy is currency, and you start to realize how expensive it was to be available for people who never invested back in you. Every time you over-explained, overcompensated, or overextended, you were making withdrawals from your own well-being. Disappearing is your way of finally saying, "No more overdrafts. You're not angry. You're exhausted." And exhaustion is sacred. It signals the end of pretending you're okay with crumbs. It whispers that you deserve more than being tolerated. You deserve to be cherished. So no, it's not revenge, it's recovery. It's the beginning of returning to wholeness. People think disappearing is a dramatic exit, but in reality, it's often the quietest, calmest decision you'll ever make. No explosions, no drama, just a soft closing of a door that should have been shut a long time ago. A door that leads you back to yourself, and in choosing yourself, you're not trying to make anyone feel small. You're simply reminding yourself that you matter too, that your peace is worth protecting, that your heart is worth healing, and that your energy is worth reclaiming, fully, unapologetically, and completely. There's something powerful about absence. It has a way of sharpening memory. When you disappear, people begin to see you clearly, maybe for the first time. The things they overlooked start to glow in hindsight. The way you showed up, the way you stayed present even when you were hurting, the way you gave love with no agenda, all of that becomes magnified. And in that clarity, your worth becomes impossible to deny. People often don't value presence. They value absence. They realize your importance not when you're near, but when you're gone. When your voice, energy, and love are no longer accessible, they're left with a void only you could fill. That void is where your worth echoes the loudest. It's in the silence after you stop checking in, the emptiness where your laughter used to be. That's when it hits them. You mattered more than they ever acknowledged. Your worth isn't built in your absence. It's revealed. Because when someone can no longer benefit from your presence, they start to reflect on how much they truly depended on it. And not just in big ways, but in the subtle daily ways, the comfort of knowing you'd be there, the emotional safety you offered, the genuine care you gave without conditions. They remember your consistency, your reliability, the way you loved without games. They start comparing every new connection to the standards you unconsciously set. And no matter how many people they meet, they keep coming back to the same conclusion: you were rare. That realization doesn't come while you're around. It comes when they're forced to navigate life without you. You become the one that got away, not because of how you left, but because of how deeply you impacted them while you were there. You didn't need to beg to be valued. You didn't have to scream your worth. You just walked away with quiet strength, and that strength spoke louder than any words ever could. They start to see you differently, not just as someone who was kind, but someone who was strong. Someone who knew their value, someone who chose peace over validation, someone who knew that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom, and that kind of self-respect leaves an impression they can't unsee. In your absence, you become undeniable, not just to them, but to yourself. You begin to see what you were offering all along, the emotional depth, the stability, the love, and once you see it, you never settle for being misunderstood again. You stop chasing people who need to lose you just to appreciate you, and maybe that's the point. Sometimes you have to disappear, not to be missed, but to be recognized, to remind others, and more importantly, yourself, that your worth never needed proving. It just needed protecting.